Bien. Arratsaldeon, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon and welcome to this press conference of the film EARWIG, which is in the official competitive section of the 69th edition of the San Sebastian Film Festival. To talk about the film, we've got with us four invited guests. Romola Garay, one of the actors in the film. Lucille Hadzi Khalilovic is co-scriptwriter and director of the film. Alex Lotha, another one of the actors, and Jeff Cox, who's also a co-writer of the script. Okay, so let's start with a question. But before anyone asks a question, Lucille, could you introduce us to the film EARWIG and explain why you decided to adapt a novel by Brian Catling, which is a text which is quite fascinating, but at the same time, I imagine it was an enormous challenge because apart from it being, it connects quite a lot, I believe, with your previous films, I believe, albeit the text is quite complicated. Okay, I'm going to speak in French. I read the novel by Brian Catling, thanks to Jeff, who's a friend of Brian's, by the way, in a moment in which the novel had not yet been published. And it's a novel which is a fascinating novel, quite mysterious and quite rich and quite a lot of elements that drew my attention quite a lot and made me feel quite familiar vis-a-vis the story, which is something I liked. And what I liked about it really was it entered into a territory that I knew nothing about. It's a character, it's a male character, an elderly gentleman or man who's the key protagonist, not the girl, and that's what I liked because it's a counter sort of. It's different. It's different to my previous project, and what I liked is it was a sensorial side of the aspect of the story, and it had a lot of depth as well. The mysterious side it had to it as well, where we had to find one has the. I had a lot of freedom in the novel, the reader, and that allowed me to find my own explanation, the story of the teeth, these ice teeth, which in the film, or in the novel, for example, which was something quite abstract but quite fascinating at the same time. And this drew my attention to start off with, or initially. So therefore, any other questions? Hi, congratulations for the film. I would like to ask how you treated the sound and the lighting, for example, which I thought was quite special. How did you work to achieve all of that? And then there's a curiosity, for example, springs to mind. I might be mistaken, but in the initial credits, I thought I saw the name of Warren Ellis in the production. I'm not too sure whether I read it correctly or what Warren Ellis it is, or whether I read it correctly. I'm not too sure. Thank you very much. I'm not too sure I got that right. Warren Ellis. Yes, I had asked him. I asked him whether he wanted to do some music for the film, and I didn't think of any melodic, but more sort of sound textures. And Warren, who said, okay, and he was interested in it, but I'm not going to prepare any music for the images. And before shooting the film, Warren sent me some sound bites, which I thought were very interesting, but I wasn't sure whether I was going to use them or not, because my idea was not to put too much music into the film. And what I did use, I liked it specifically, or quite particularly, because it's work with using Martenot waves, or wavelengths. And with that instrument, the Martenot wavelengths was an atemporal type of music, and that's the piece that best fitted into the film. And I think that piece of music, gave us the idea that the moments in which Albert, the protagonist of the film, looks at the glasses, and the glasses it gave a sort of a trance situation at that time, at that moment, and that piece of music enabled me to develop those moments in which Albert admires those glasses with the idea of movement in the music. Warren Ellis had composed some musical pieces, and I thought it was very interesting to have that same piece, which is repeated, that music, which is quite atemporal, or timeless, we could say. And this extract of music was composed with not only with Warren Ellis. And for the image and the lighting, as you said, the challenge was to shoot in an apartment with the shutters closed and without any lighting. To shoot the film in absolute penumbra, almost perpetual penumbra, like Gothic tales where the action takes place in the dark. This was one of the clear direction that I wanted in the film. And the DOP of the film, the director of photography, in fact, shot in a closed apartment without any lighting, and the truth be said, he achieved a magnificent result. What he managed to draw out was quite expressive, quite seductive as well. And we also wanted to shoot with fixed, as if they were paintings, with a fixed camera and just without moving the camera. And with vis-a-vis the sound, we wanted it to be a very silent film, in the darkness and in silence. And that silence was filled with the work of Ken Yasumoto, who is the person that edited the sound of the film. What we tried to do is to maintain that feeling of silence above all, to contribute that mysterious side, especially within the apartment setting. Then outside, there's much more sound, and there's also dialogues, obviously. Yes, a question? First of all, congratulations for the film. I'm over here. I'm not too sure where he is. I can't see him. But when I knew that you were turning up to the festival, and I was already impressed, I said, this is going to want me to go to the festival. I knew you were coming, because if you're a football player, you'd be amongst the top. You'd be in Paris Saint-Germain. You'd be playing in the first 11, so to speak. You're incredibly good. Okay, Lucille. So therefore, there's a couple of questions. The forest is something that you also did in the previous one, but here, this is one of the approaches that you like to use a lot. Did you include that, or was that already in the original book, the forest side and also the palace in some of the sequences that emerge that appear in the film? And the second question, when did you choose that girl? Because the girl's portrayal and performance is extraordinary. I was quite impressed. And it's not easy to work with kids, as you know. So these are the two questions. And there's no two questions without a third question. Okay? And that's all I have to say, I think. Thank you very much. I'm glad to compare me with the football player of Paris Saint-Germain, the first 11. I would like to say to the... yes, she has... Did you understand the question? Yes. Yes, and Romula. She said, yes, that you've portrayed your role very well. And the forest, well, there's no forest. Or is there a forest? Did you see a forest? Yes, of course, there was a park. And there's a bit of nature there. And in the film, it's a moment it's almost a moment of escape outside of that claustrophobic world. And the park per se is also quite claustrophobic. And that formed part of the novel. They went to walk in the park, the girl falls into the water, and so on. It wasn't a palace or a castle. It was almost a clinic with little paths within the park. That was in the novel. These were elements that I liked very much about the book. For once, it's not a film made in the nature, but it's a film within a house where we're all closed in the mind of Albert's mind, with some decoration, but it's very difficult to situate it. It's like a jigsaw puzzle to fit them all the parts together. Yeah, in the front row, the girl that you were referring to, she's here with us, and she's fantastic, by the way. So I just thought I'd let the journalists know that. There's another question back there.
Brazil. I have two questions. It's a very mysterious film, and we can define it in many ways, but I had the sensation I was watching a study about loneliness. We have a very lonely character dealing with the shadows of his soul. I would like to ask you to say a few words about that environment of loneliness surrounding the whole film. The second question is, I think it's impossible to watch a movie like that without thinking about Kafka. Kafka's literature was a reference to you in some point. Thank you.
Oui, en fait.
It's a history of repression and of the past, of the memory, and I'm thinking about Vienna in this case, in Central Europe. For me, this film is the portrait of Albert, who is someone who's quite alone, very lonely. He's quite confused, and he's not in a very things that have happened to him in the past, and he feels quite a lot of guilt vis-a-vis a son or a daughter that perhaps he had, and that appears and emerges under the shape of this little girl. This, Jeff, you're a co-script writer. Could you explain the whys and whereabouts of the challenges of adapting this novel? Because I think it's fascinating, but it's not easy to put it on the screen, don't you think?
Porque
No, I'm just.
sí.
Sorry.
Ah.
Yeah. Could you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, don't worry.
I suppose it was deciding what to leave out and what didn't fit the story as it was becoming. It's a bit like reading the novel and then redreaming it, I guess. It's like that sort of thing, which was what we wanted to do, and that there were great things in the novel. It's a wonderful novel that weren't part of our Albert's world, our Albert's loss, our Albert's guilt, our Albert's desire. I don't think you can call it desire. Anyway, there were these things that we had to cut, and sometimes they were hard to cut because they were wonderful and they would make a wonderful other earwig. But I think at the same time it was also a joy, because it was, as soon as Brian told me his first image for what became the novel, it was a very weird experience, because he had this image and instantly I thought about Lucille and thought, oh, it's a film for Lucille, but he only had an image or two images. And so I said to him, well, this sounds like a film for my friend Lucille. And he then saw Lucille's films and was astonished, and he then wrote the book very quickly. And I gave it to Lucille, and so that's how it happened. But were there any particular challenges that?
Non, je voudrais aussi.
No, I would also like to say something. What was great with Brian Kettling, the author of the novel, but he's also a plastic artist that does performances, and he's a sculptor. He has a very playful relationship with everything he does. we let him go, we let him free, so to say. And this was very interesting because he said, I don't know what you're going to do with, I don't want to know what you're going to do with our novel. Let's do something with it, but I'm going to give you the freedom to do so. And I said, I'm going to betray you. He said, well, that's all well and good. I don't mind if you betray me. And he gave us the freedom to do so. It was a work of having to concentrate on specific elements. There are many things about Albert's past, and we focused upon the story of Marie, his dead wife, and the question of the girl who he had supposedly had with her. It's a story of the past and the present. First of all, congratulations for the film. And my question is for Alex. As regards portraying your character, whether you adapted yourself very well to Lawrence, how did you deal with how to portray your character? Thank you very much.
Question. One thing I remember talking about with Romola when we first met on set in Brussels was that it sort of felt like we were stepping into Lucille's dream, and that we were characters in this sort of fever dream. And very quickly, with the locations in which we shot and the atmosphere that was to do with being outside in Brussels in autumn or in these sort of smoky bars that we were shooting in, I was really aware of how thick the atmosphere was, and so I feel like it was just a matter of being in that environment letting oneself be led through that environment by Lucille. And it was a pleasure.
Romola, could you also explain what your experience was? Because I imagine it's a film which is based upon, it doesn't have too many dialogues. It uses the other expressive aspects of of the performance of the actors. Romola, could you tell us what your experience was like?
I was familiar with Lucille's work, so I knew that it would, the kind of film that it would be. But I think, normally when you make a film and you're acting in it, you're sort of like foot soldiers in this enterprise, which is about representing the director's vision for what the film is about and pushing their point of view, and you kind of become part of this enterprise about telling the audience what they have to think about the world, But when you make a film with somebody who's interested only in having a entirely democratic relationship with the audience, where everybody can come and just exchange their ideas about what it is, and it's a much more communal experience. Your role as an actor is very different, and I think Lucille would very much allow us to bring our own experiences to, the creative work. And, as Alex was saying, as long as we were in the dream, we could be there for whatever reason we wanted to be. And that's a very unusual and very sort of democratic way of working.
We had another question over here, yes? Here we go. There's the microphone. Oh, hi. Thank you very much for your film. I liked it very much. It seemed to me that it's a very sort of dark film, difficult to understand with the first time I've seen it. That is to say, perhaps there are dreams that remind me of Edgar Allan Poe. How was the atmosphere between all of you on set? Now you're all smiling, and I see you're all very happy. But what was the atmosphere? What was the atmosphere on set, albeit you're smiling? What was the experience on set in shooting the film? Well, we weren't Albert. We weren't that character. Thank God we weren't. Each of us were ourselves, obviously, and we were basically manufacturing, doing it, making a film, shooting a film. The shooting of the film has nothing to do with the finished film, undoubtedly. We shot quite a lot of time within the apartment, and after a certain period of time, we were also suffocating within the room. So we started with a 2-day shoot to do all of the sequences with the teeth, with Roman, with the girl. And it was quite difficult to shoot, not like in the film, because we had to be very precise in the gestures with all the accessories that we used, and with her, who was very patient, and she was very, very concentrated and to stay there for many hours sitting in that seat with people putting things into her mouth, with the accessories and with everyone getting involved and getting in her way. And then there are certain aspects, for example, the scene on the lake. It's a very beautiful park in the in autumn. It was very cold. It was an atmosphere. It was a bit depressive, not in making the film, but in the atmosphere. Roman obviously doesn't fall into the water. It's a stunt, or it's a double, and that's a very strong scene, and it's something which is quite emotional. But in making the film, it was different. What I would like to say is we shot during the COVID pandemic. We were very happy of making a film during that very difficult time, during the lockdown, I imagine she means, which didn't make us feel depressed. All the contrary, it made it feel very enthusiastic and very joyful and very excited at the same time. And what about you two? What have you got to say?
Pleasure to, because we were also in this COVID time, it was such a pleasure to be working, despite everything else. But, you know, the first day I shot was with Romola, and it was in that park. And the next scene I worked on was in the bar. And I just, with this film, I kept coming back to how much of a pleasure it was to enter into these, really thick atmospheres. I can't really explain it any other way. And the set was very quiet and very concentrated, and that's such a pleasure as well, because you can keep working all day because it's focused but also felt really essential to the scenes that were being played, when not, sometimes nothing is said between two characters, but there's something very strong, it feels, happening between them. So all of that led to making, I found, work as an actor much easier, actually, yeah.
And the sequences at the end, where Celeste is having the kind of simultaneous dream with Albert, and then obviously the final moment with the biting, like the experiences that it wouldn't be at all common to be at work and to be playing scenes that you think, I have my own understanding of this, but I'm not being told what it means. And so I think there's a tremendous level of mutual trust that happens in an environment where people are working in that way, which just is extremely uncommon.
Ce qui était vraiment super, c'est que,
The difficulty, we thought it was formidable to be able to shoot in Belgium, that Romola and Paul, who's not here today, who's the character of Albert, had to come from England. I couldn't see them much beforehand, before shooting. We had not rehearsed beforehand. We worked more with Roman because we did some auditions and tests, but with Romola and Alex and Paul arrived very shortly before the shooting of the film, and they sort of were dropped into that atmosphere. We didn't rehearse too much. We didn't talk much about the film. They didn't know how to rehearse with them on set, and I wanted to drop them into the deep end with their costumes and to create a world around them. And that's what we were going to do. Let's do our performances there and manufacture those characters together. It was quite well directed, but at the same time, they were very free to perform. Romola was talking about the end sequence when we shot the sequence where she's in a room and she enters into a trance. And we, on the paper, we didn't know quite well how we were going to portray this or show it. And Romola did something which was quite incredible. She portrayed that trance, and Alex was always, he contributed his own color to the character, his character in the film. I think it's almost a game. I think we were playing, really, at the end of the day. It was a game which was a bit sinister and a bit heavy at the same time, but we had a lot of fun. And we have to ask Roman whether she had fun or not. Hi, thank you very much for being here, and congratulations for the film. My question has to do with the music, because Alex talked about the atmosphere. Someone else talked about sound before, and I think it's very interesting about the soundtrack, which has drew my attention quite a lot. I'm not too sure whether there's been any specific indication for composing the score, where it comes from anywhere else, but it seems a film that has taken care of a lot of the details in that sense, and music is one of the things that makes you get more involved in the film. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to you. As I said beforehand, I asked Warren Ellis whether he could compose music, pieces of music, and I said, well, we don't need too much. What we need are sound textures, because there are not too many words. There's not a lot of dialogue. So therefore, I knew that there was going to be a lot of work based upon some sort of musical piece. The sound of the light in the refrigerator. We worked a lot upon that, but not so much with the music. But with the sound editor, what we did was prepare those elements. The music was another element. We said, let's not base ourselves upon the music itself, but let's allow the musical decoration, so to say, to exist. Let's create a universe with the sounds that only belong to that story. The sounds of the house and of outside, for example, only the train and the bell ringing in a church, that forms part of the narrative. But we worked with something that was quite specific, that is, say, what are the sounds in this house? What are the sounds you hear outside? And then the music only works in the moments of the trance, for example, or as a lullaby. As a chorus, it's almost the same music which is repeated time and time again, and it wasn't easy. The sound editor said it was difficult because as there weren't many sounds, a lot of sound, every sound was quite heavy. We couldn't make a mistake in choosing the sounds. I think that he did a great job in how he selected them. We also collaborated with someone that gave us some sound textures, like as sound layers. It's not music, they're just textures, really, in order to preserve the silence, especially in the first part of the film. Any further questions? Hi. As Romola said a moment ago, or her opinion, there's a very democratic way of directing which affects the audience as well. As an audience myself, I was focused upon the aspect of the teeth. Since I was a kid, teeth symbolized death in my dreams, and I would like to know what your interpretation is specifically vis-a-vis the teeth. Well, exactly, I'm not too sure. I thought I knew something before making the film, but that less and less so. What I liked about the novel is the mixture of the teeth, which is which is quite vital, quite powerful, quite solid on the one hand, and also the idea of, in this case, they were made of ice that they could melt. And so therefore, I thought that was incredible, that mixture between being what is hard and what is soft. And when we started to make the film, we worked with a person who does dental prostheses to see whether the texture were, if the teeth were made of ice, what would the teeth be like? And we realized the teeth were similar to real teeth molded in ice. And it was a great letdown for the entire crew, because what was that about? You know, ice teeth doesn't really change things too much. But perhaps, Albert, the fact that they are ice teeth that melt, and we always have to mold them time and time again. He has to complete the girl, because what she's missing and what she's lacking are the teeth, and he does this in a very irrational way. He has to redo them every day and put them in the fridge, and that's what he's seeking, perhaps. That's what the character's looking for. She needs him every day for new teeth, and that's her that's his burden. He's got to start time and time again. He can't make a complete girl with everlasting teeth, if you catch what I'm saying. Perhaps that's not the meaning of the teeth. Perhaps you should ask Dr. Freud what all of that means. Who knows? Any further questions? Okay, normally I don't like to abuse and take the microphone during the press conference, but before you talked about the pandemic, and obviously the pandemic is obviously hindering and harming mankind quite a lot, but also in culture, it's harming culture quite a lot. And my question to Lucille, what's the situation in Europe, in France? I know that in France helps its cinema industry quite a lot, but what's the situation? The truth is, how do you see it as during the pandemic? How do you see the current situation of the world of cinema in Europe? That is to say, what's closest to us? In France, generally speaking, and throughout the world, I could say, we have not, we've not left the worst behind yet. But in France, for a year and a half, the film theaters were closed. There were no premieres at all. And now they opened up with a smaller capacity, but it was a smaller capacity of people, but it was very difficult to be able to screen the films during the pandemic. In the French film system, there's quite a lot of aid that's received for film productions, and this comes from the tickets, the box office. That is to say, part of the money comes from the box office, and all of a sudden there was no audiences, so therefore there's much less money available. It's an important source of financing for auteur films in France, and this will have repercussions in the next year, and perhaps in the next 2 years. Vis-a-vis production, we've got the problem also, above all, of distribution, because the distributors have many films in, and they've not been able to screen. They've accumulated, and there's a backlog, and it's not been easy for the films to be screened. In film theaters, it's going to be tough, and this is going to continue for some time. I think that France, we are quite fortunate, because we receive a lot of support for our industry. But there are festivals. You are here in San Sebastian. There was a lot of an audience in the film theater, and that's great. Things are starting up again, and let's hope things last. And this will take some time. Hi again. I would like to ask a possible symbology of the cat, if there is anything. What meaning does the cat have? And the truth is, I remember it was very funny in the film theater, what happens or what tries to be done to the cat, felt it was quite funny that the audience took that on as something much more important than what happened to the rest of the characters. Quite curious. Well, I thought you would be more afraid of Mia, of the young girl, but the cat belongs to a tradition of Gothic tales. The cat is the devil, and Albert encounters someone who's similar to the devil, who's like the dentist who comes to reconstruct Mia's teeth. And he brings a gift, brings the cat as a pet, but it's almost a surreal type of element. This story, well, it's not normal that a dentist brings a cat. That normally doesn't happen. I liked the character of the cat. Why? Well, because it's the devil that sent that dentist with a black cat. Well, okay, the cat didn't suffer at all, by the way. The cat is an extraordinary cat. In fact, there were 2 or 3 cats. It wasn't the same cat, okay? They were really, it was easy to strangulate them, but they were very nice. And it wasn't the cat who was traumatized, it was the actor Albert. Well, in fact, the end scene when the cat is in the clinic and he jumps up with joy when he sees Albert. Albert felt very relaxed at the same time when that happened. So we were very fortunate with the cat. Just to ask you, how did you know that the person who you chose for sound was the right person to choose? Yes, could you repeat the question, please, if you'd be so kind, because we didn't understand you. Yes. How did you know that you were choosing the right person for the sound? How did you know that the person was the right person to do the job? Well, because I'd already seen films in which he had created the sound. You're talking about the sound editor, okay, the person who worked with the soundtrack after the shoot. Okay. He didn't work on his own. He worked along with another person. Kanyo Asumoto, who's the sound editor, I've seen films that he'd made, and I knew that he could do things that were very, very interesting. And he understood the atmosphere of the film very well, but the same with all of the other people who worked on this film. It's something intuitive. These are challenges. Well, this person, I'm going to do this, for example, and I was quite fortunate in this film to have a team or a crew that was very motivated, and in the image side of things and the sound side of things, the person that did all the accessories that we use. Well, this person who's also an excellent professional and who's very inspired. It's a real gift to the god of cinema that I got all these people together, and we were quite fortunate to have them in the film. I'm not too sure. Okay, there's one final question in order to finish the press conference. The director, I'd like to know what your different participations here in San Sebastian. From the beginning of your career, you've presented all your feature films here. You won new directors, and then with your first film, you won the jury award with Evolution, your second feature film. What do you expect now in San Sebastian, and what does this film festival mean in your career? Yes, the truth is, I was very, very lucky and very fortunate in San Sebastian. I love coming here. I think it's a festival which is quite warm, very hospitable. This year's a bit special. There are less people, but I still believe it's fantastic because there's a lot of audience in the film theaters. Real audience, not only professionals, and they come to see films without knowing what they are about due to curiosity or whatever. And it is true that I've not made a lot of films, that every time I've ever made a film, I've come here. And I would just like to say that I'm very, very happy of being here. I thank the organizers of the festival very much for having invited me. And I would like to see what's the reaction of the press, because I've always had bad press here. I must say this as well. But I'm very happy that you're here and that you've asked us so many questions, okay? And being very nice to us. I just wish you the best of luck with the film. And a big round of applause for Romana, who is also down there as well.